Right.
Brilliant. Well, firstly, welcome, and a particular welcome to Karen and Martin. Thank you for sticking with us through that seminar. I'm sorry, it was probably one designed for to be in the room, and thank you for hanging in there and also hanging in here for the meeting. So please feel a full part of the meeting as well as you can. And certainly if you have questions or comments you want to make, I would encourage you to let it be known, probably either with a hand raise or in some way waving, and I'll do my best to take that there. So thank you for being here, and thank you again that we follow through this afternoon with the meeting now, and I will try and take it at some reasonable speed, but with the time it needs to take. Is anybody under particular time pressure?
Paul and I had 4:45.
Yep. So if we were to try and aim to finish by 4:30, we should try and do that. Actually, got us my time pressure, Melissa. So, but we'll see how we go. I'm here for the time that it needs to take. Okay, we're recording the meeting. You're well aware of that, and you folk are probably more aware of the health and safety than I am. I just happened to notice before that's the exit. We have got the whiteboard out of the way. So please, we follow the sensible things. Paul, unfair, I haven't asked you, would you like to do this in the Karakia, please?
I shall need a reference.
Oh, sorry.
Very happy to.
Oh, I would have been happy to have done it then. I hadn't realised that.
Ora os oeds, kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa punamu te moana, hia hurahi mā tātou e tarangi nei, aroha ato mai tātou e tātou katoa. May peace be widespread, may the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Let us show respect to each other, for one another, bind us all together.
Very appropriate. It's great. Okay. Apologies. We obviously have one from Kay. Sorry, and anybody else?
Councillor Evans.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So I'll move from the chair that we sustain those apologies. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Alistair. Motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. We have the agenda set out in front of us. Is there any matters that people need to declare or note their interests? No. I haven't been informed of any public requests for public participation, albeit if anybody is online that is from the public, you're welcome to be here. Great to have you here. And there are no actions coming out of that because there's been no public participation. No extraordinary business. So if we just look at the meeting minutes, which are enclosed, I wonder if we could be very efficient and also deal with the public excluded session minutes that were, I think, that were also separately circulated. If that's not reaching a process too much, I'll move from the chair that we accept those as a true and correct record. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Melissa. Were there any points of accuracy or similar that needed to be raised? Like they were pretty good to me. Okay, so I'll move the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Righty, if we could move to this great omnibus report, Karen. Well done. Sorry. Oh, I'm getting well, but my apologies to you, Amy. Karen, we're in your hands.
Right, thank you, Chair. So this, as I mentioned earlier in the Finance Committee, this is a report that goes across both committees because a lot of the content applies to both committees and highlights some. Right. So, and first of all, the finance report as at the 31st of May, which is period 11 of the financial year. So 1 month to go to year end. So the current results are showing that whilst revenue is on track, we are experiencing overspend in our expenses. Primarily, the results are showing, and remember these results are printed in the format of the annual plan, significant activities, so the business unit level report, that some of our expenditure is over. And that's largely around the timing of the NCEA funding, some emergency events that we're still to work through financially. So at the moment, we are hoping that some of these subsidies do come from NZTA, and we're going to manage that over the next few weeks. Equally, some of the grants and subsidies that are in the revenue apply to some of the costs below. So there's an offset. And there is a table here that demonstrates some of those unbudgeted items where we've got additional revenue and we've spent some of it. Change in policy is that if we have received unbudgeted funding in the form of grants, that we don't recognise all the revenue until we've started to spend it, whereas historically all of the grant would have been recognised as revenue. So we do carry some funds in the balance sheet that have yet to be recognised and brought forward. So 1 month to go and we're almost, well, now we're there anyway. So we're currently processing year end. And we are due to have the first results available for Audit New Zealand on the 31st of August. We're still working through accruals and balance sheet reconciliations and anything else that needs to be reviewed as part of year end. And we will bring to the Finance Committee, or probably whole of Council, draft financial results in September. So this is the P&L and the financial statements as at May, and broken down into high level income versus expenditure, financial position. We also incorporate Wellington Water into our results because obviously that's a key component of our annual plan and our budgets. Wellington Water have indicated an unbudgeted expense for the year that is not reflected in the numbers as at May, but it's gone to council to be approved. It was an additional 240,000, so that will come out at year end.
Sorry, Karen,
Yes.
so your mid-flight,
Yes.
Wellington Water have within their contracted agreement, they have the ability to go outside of their.
They do.
They do.
But we have managed that situation better this year by saying, whilst you have that ability, we really would prefer to take that to council, which we did last month. So that 240 was an emergency event that they spent, but we said it's not in budget. So we've introduced further controls around their spending. And I believe there may be a couple of other things that were in negotiation with them. So at the moment, that's an authorised overspend for Wellington Water. So without going into some of the detail, we produce some of these reports monthly and quarterly. We provide a summary of our investments and our borrowings. As most of you will know, in terms of our investments, previous council and our investment policy, we must spread our risk across every bank, and we cannot hold more than 50% at any one time in a bank across the country. So hence why we've got quite a range of banks. Our summary of borrowings, which is with LGFA, that is 26.4. And you'll see that of that, Three Waters makes up 21 million of our borrowings. And that forms part of the water reform program. In terms of capital expenditure, we provide a summary of our work program and progress to date. That's listed in those pages. Any questions on capital expenditure? Anything so far? Okay.
Yeah, let's just query Hinakura for a minute.
Hinakura.
Yeah, so page 24, I think it is. 8 of 9.
Page 24.
Yeah. Or page 8 of 9 on probably on your.
Okay.
Yeah, I was really interested that emergency works, then access works in Admiral Hill. I would, and some has come out of roading reserves and some have come out of depreciation reserves. Is that not all attributable to the storm and the road slipping? No matter what we did out there, it was all attributable to that one event, that road disaster. And shouldn't we be putting it all into one category and saying, here you are, Wakakota, you know, come to the party? We seem to have spent a lot of our reserves on that when it was a storm damage, which we probably could have got if we.
I believe we brought this to council some time ago and we used some of our reserves for emergency, but some of it's for different components. So it's not all coming from the same source. So, you know, the design phase, and
You know, I'm not talking about the fourth item. I'm talking about the first three, which is the renew and improve.
Yeah.
So the 244, the 163 and the 76, that seems to be all part of the emergency response to that road. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
well, I would have to get Stefan to.
We had just have a look at
But I think that there is different components to that piece of work. It wasn't all emergency. So maybe an action item for Stefan to further explain.
Can I just make an observation? Because I think some of the funds were in relationship to our temporary road that we help fund as well for Stone Company's name now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's the access work.
That's the access works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just not, maybe that's the answer, but I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got different components to that work. They're not all linked.
We could perhaps just get that spread out a little bit, so or have a look at that, because that's where our rural roading reserve has been drained largely.
It's in part, but not completely.
We've used 200 and
Yeah.
230,000 there.
On a go.
I'm aware it's come, but I'd like to go back and just say, have we claimed everything from Waka Kotahi that potentially could of that issue?
Did you capture that? Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, we'll come back and answer the question.
Yep.
Probably bring that back to Collins Committee rather than here. Might be more appropriate to go back to, that's all right. And I have to go back to finance maybe.
Yeah, back to finance.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so just without going into detail into the financial statements, but we also provide well, it's not in this one, but a quarterly reserve. And as I said, we've only got 1 month to go for year end. I might help if I look at the right report. So page 52, we talk about outstanding rates. As at May, obviously, we're doing pretty well. Last financial year, 1% is outstanding, and we don't have high risk around the outstanding balances, and we are managing to recover very well in the outstanding rates. We are trying to encourage people to use direct debit as a method of payment, but it's pretty difficult to get that number up from 41%. We are still experiencing people who are finding it difficult to pay their rates, and they're going on to payment plans, and there are some people not understanding how rates work. So at the moment, as at this time of this report in May, the rates is pretty good, but we expect that to change. We are getting a lot of complaints from the community now. That will be a more difficult position to maintain going forward.
Because it's the challenge there is going to be when a lot of the properties come off their fixed mortgage rates as well. As it's not going to be the rates. The rates is going to be the first indication, but it's actually possibly the new mortgage rates that people are going to pay that are going to be the things that's going to push people over the edge. But we will be the first ones to feel it because it's the easiest one to actually say, I'm not going to pay.
It's perhaps the easiest way, or to say not pay, but it's the hardest not to pay because it's tax.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're getting a lot of complaints now about people saying they can't afford to pay. And we're working with a lot of people in the community to do repayment plans and try and kind of help them.
The people that say that, or the families that are finding the financial stress, are they still paying part of their rates, what they can afford at the time? So
Yes.
they're not just saying, I can't afford paying rates.
It's a mixture. It's a mixture. Some are not paying on protest, and some are not paying because they can't afford to. So it's a combination. But of course, then they get the penalties, and then we have to work with them on penalties and remissions. So we have some people who are clearly not paying
On principle.
on principle.
I presume that we don't give them a lot of flexibility.
Well, it's a tax, so they have to pay, and we have methods to claim that back. Okay, so moving from the financial.
Sorry, if I could just.
Yes.
Questions, if that's okay. you can imagine what my question is going to be, which is to the extent that the budget is a slice of our financial strategy. It does look reasonably okay that we are more or less on track. I mean, I'm not going to sneeze at us currently being $1.3 million down on our operating surplus and how that falls through. But broadly, we are consistent with where we anticipated with our financial strategy.
Broadly, but until I see some of the further subsidies and accruals.
I know you've got another month to go.
And it is quite difficult to forecast.
Yeah.
And I'd have to say in this year's results, with some unexpected budgeted costs that were included. So to be honest, there's pressure on that number. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I think the other thing, sorry, just to note, I think it is within this committee's role to be vigilant around the rates situation. If indeed, as you say, we start to get a thickening of the rates outstanding, and because of a level of resistance, we need to be thinking about that, because that's
There's two parts to it, really, isn't there? Can't pay and won't pay.
Oh, my point is it's the won't pay that we need to be concerned about, because as you're quite rightly saying, that does then give rise to the need to enforce the statutory debt. And A, it takes a lot of time out of staff, but B, it's less than what you want to do.
We can only record some of that information, so we couldn't tell you who's not paying by protest versus someone who can't afford to pay. We can just say this is the total debt outstanding and it's increased.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. So moving on to the rest of the content of my finance report. In the finance committee, we talked about obviously the increase in insurance, and we have two components to our insurance. We have our above ground assets and below ground. And Marsh, who came to our finance committee, they insure for above ground assets, and currently council have a policy to fully insure all their assets. And we discussed at the finance committee that would follow a review of that as part of the LTP process. So we have fully insured all of the assets. There's two components really to the increase, is that premiums have gone up in the wider market and internationally, and the value of our assets has increased. So those two events, plus inflation and all sorts of other bits, have produced a very high increase in insurances. Now, we're not unique in this, and Carterton and Masterton have experienced the same increases. So we buy our insurance as a combined council, the three councils, and they have had the same kind of issues as we have. Now, Marsh insure on a different time period to the local authority protection program, and Marsh has just started from the 1st of July. Now, these figures are not final for two reasons. We don't have the lapped component that's due in the next couple of months. So we've estimated what we could expect to see as an increase of, say, 15%. I believe that's conservative, and it will be higher. The Marsh premiums at time of writing were quotes, and that is now coming in this week. So I would be bringing back to council perhaps unbudgeted or over actuals to budget costs in this area. Now, we've talked a lot about insurance previously and what we may wish to insure and not to insure, but that's a separate conversation as part of LTP, and our insurance broker has offered to come and work with us on that area, in particular risk and self-insurance.
Karen, just before you move on, and I know I did hear you cover this in finance, but just looking at the table of the variances, motor vehicles is the standout for not good reasons. Is that just based purely on the insurance premiums, or have we
have some new motor vehicles?
We've done some stuff as well.
Yes, we have increased, got purchase some new motor vehicles and, yeah, that's probably.
So the combination.
The most significant increases in material damage because the value of our assets has increased from 50 million to 86, and that has had a huge impact.
That's based on revaluation of
Valuation.
of the asset.
Yeah.
That's a really terrible question to ask, but how often do we claim?
We've had no claims in the last 30th of June 2022. We have a claim table now, not, but that doesn't impact your premiums.
No, I'm just, well, that's obviously the question of self-insurance is what's the limit we're covering here? If we haven't had a claim for 15 years in some complaints, have we actually paid for that item already?
Possibly, yes.
And that's the question of self-insurance.
Question at Finance Committee is why we're insuring the public toilets. But that's a decision for council, and I believe it has gone back to council before, and we've said, here's a schedule of our assets. Is there anything you wish to not insure? And the answer has always been, historically, we wish to fully insure.
I think perhaps it's been we've had too many other issues to deal with, regardless of worrying about insurances, which is probably right down the list of things we've dealt with over the years. Now it's becoming when you've got a 50% increase.
And it'll be higher.
And higher.
Yeah.
That's now probably something that we want to actually.
And all councils.
I realise that.
So that's a big topic for council to review.
Well, maybe we'll get your committee to look at that first and come back with some recommendations to us.
I just wonder, actually, I'm conscious, Martin, I'd just like to invite Martin to ask this question, but I would like to just come back to a bit of turf for your column about insurances, obviously. So let's, Martin, you've got a question.
Oh, well, no, it's not a question, just an observation. I felt one of the most useful things that was said by the insurance broker is that we should look upon our insurance as earthquake insurance. It's the it's our backup for the day that Christchurch happens to us, and we shouldn't be looking on it possibly the way we might look on, I don't know, contents insurance for our personal well-being. I thought that was quite an interesting thing to reflect on, and I think it then comes to just sort of adding it on to Alistair's comment, that if we did ask ourselves, if we did have a very large earthquake here, and incidentally, all the seismologists say it's not if, it's when, then a question we should ask is actually, what would we rebuild? And that might be worth thinking about in terms of future insurance decisions. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Martin. I think that, and Colin, actually, it's not a turf warfare, but I'd like to invite, I actually think, can I be honest, this is valid. This is a risk discussion that we've got to have, which is actually in the light of risk, what's our appetite? And as part of our strategy of managing risk, how much do we try and cover by way of insurance? So I'd be very interested. I mean, essentially the new round has come through. It's gone, hasn't it? But I would think that for the next year, so we're talking 1 July next year, 24, that it would be useful for us to have a discussion with Marsh as our brokers as to what are the options, because I take it you said they will work with the three councils. What I would be expecting them to do is to think through some of those strategies, which, we're hinting at. We don't have a big claim history. We possibly don't have to one of the accepted ways of reducing our premium is by assuming a higher excess. It's also looking at what is going back to Martin's point, what is the maximum probable loss that we would face? I mean, we have 3 townships. Probably arguably all 3 could be affected at the same time, but then, there needs to be some review. Could that be the case? Are we likely only to face a subset of problems, as in contrast to everything going down at one hit, in which case the maximum probable loss may be somewhat less than our $80 million of insured asset. It might be, and I'm just putting a number out of me, 60 million. In which case, actually, what we should be insuring is 60 million less in excess, not 80 million less in excess. So we should be talking to the market about what is the right way to go about it. So, Colin, all I'm wanting to reflect here is that sort of discussion is around risk appetite. What is a smart way to do it? And I think that's actually something that if the finance committee was head to, we should as a committee be sponsoring that debate for next year.
So one of the key things that we discussed this morning were a number of elements that will fit within the long-term plan and insurance and premiums, for instance, slotted into that. So I've asked Amy if she wouldn't mind collating the information that comes out of our committee meetings for subjects for our long-term plan discussions. And I think insurance right across the sector is really, really important to have that conversation. You from a risk perspective, I guess us from a financial perspective, and the whole of council basically from an appetite thing. So I think you're absolutely right.
You said Marsh have just taken over our brokerage. Is that right?
No, sorry, they've just confirmed.
Oh, they've confirmed. Yeah.
They've been our broker for decades, I understand. And they do it as a combined council for the district.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the point perhaps I'd love to know what is the benefit of being in the collective, and there should be a benefit. I just want to so we should just shake the foundation we've bad punters in it, just try and work it through.
The other consideration is if we are going to change our risk or insurance policy as the community, how far do we have to go before we consult? If we tell the community we're not insuring the public toilets or whatever, there is that element too.
That would be like a red rag to pull some of the youth that we have, I would have thought. You should probably keep that very quiet.
There's all considerations.
It's no rules instead.
I can just see.
Right.
Right. I wonder if we can keep ourselves moving. I'm just conscious that we've got a couple of people, 3 of us actually, want to keep moving.
Right.
Move at some stage. So thank you. Annual audits?
Move quickly. So for the year end 30th of June 2022, we received an unmodified audit opinion, which was correct news, and I've enclosed a copy of their the audit recommendations, which has not come to a committee previously. There were only 3 necessary points to note, and we've commented and responded on those 3 points. There was some outstanding from the previous year, which they've chosen to review this year. So all in all, I think it's something like 6 necessary. There were no urgent audit points. The recurring theme, though, is the annual leave balances for staff, and that's often a regular thing on the dashboard, is keeping that annual leave balances to the prescribed recommended level of 200 hours per employee, which is about 27 days. So we're monitoring that and we are putting in place leave plans with the staff. But we have some high leave balances because we have limited resources in key areas and people are finding it difficult to take their leave. It's no different to any other council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was further actually impacted during COVID when people couldn't take annual leave because of lockdown, during a time when people would normally go away on holiday and that kind of thing. We are quite privileged in many respects that we've got a very loyal workforce in certain areas, and they've been here for a very long period of time and have amassed quite an annual leave balance, which now needs to be actively managed. We have about 15 members of staff that are affected by leave management plans at this moment in time.
Relatively.
What do you mean by leave management?
So this is where, for example, discussions around whether one of my team, for example, is taking annual leave 1 day a week, in order to bring that leave down. But obviously, it has to be resourced that time when that person is taking annual leave because of the nature of work that she does. So it's just really working about strategies in which we can kind of reduce it down without impacting upon service deliverables, really. We do have challenges in certain areas around, for example, our roading team. animal control team, all of our customer facing type roles, libraries, where they have very high annual leave balances, and it's an ongoing challenge to try and pull it down, especially when we have single points of failure within the organisation. And we rely on that person to be able to do something.
How do you manage that for, take animal control, for example, and we know we've got very few, basically one. Are we sharing a resource with our other two councils here to cover? Because they'll be in a similar boat, I would imagine, because
We have been exploring that, and I mean, this weekend was a prime example of where we had to make a tactical decision to not actually provide 24-hour leave over the weekend period. Otherwise, we would have had this one person, because the other staff member had COVID, where he was on call for 3 solid weeks. So it's really quite a challenge to address some of these leave balances.
But I completely accept that, but it is a huge financial risk as well too.
Indeed. We are constrained by the Holidays Act, unfortunately. Only 5 days per year can be, to use a better phrase, forced leave, or, and it's not an and or, paid out per employee. So when you're dealing with kind of having to manage that legislative requirements, then you know, when you've got leave balances which are actually quite high, it has limited impact.
Are we starting to pay off for 5 days a year for the really excessive?
Yeah.
Yeah, so every single person has been asked, yeah.
By the time they take the leave, the next 5 have already accrued. So it's a very difficult.
Does the employer have the right to say your leave balance has got to X? We are paying out 5 days of your leave, or is that a negotiation?
No, it's a negotiation.
Negotiation. Some employers have a policy where they don't pay out annual leave for 5 days per annum, but we do.
Do we have a policy of every employer has to take a minimum number of days actual leave a year?
Well, the only close down period that we have, which is enforced, is over the Christmas holiday period. We don't actually, outside of that, it has to be through active leave management. We don't enforce it. We can't force people
A 3-week Christmas.
to take a, yeah.
Actually, you can force people to take leave as an employer. That is perfectly acceptable.
As I'm saying,
It's not a right to agree.
no, as I'm saying, the Holidays Act actually only allows us to force to take 5 days a year. Yeah, so that's the only enforcement that we can actually, it's the only lever we can pull. So it requires us to actually actively manage leave over and above that.
And it's difficult.
Mhm.
Okay. The current year's audit, 2023, the interim audit was for 1 week in June, and the final audit is scheduled to commence for 3 weeks from the 25th of September to the 13th of October. I believe Carterton are on exactly the same timeframe. And we've expressed back to Audit New Zealand, this makes it quite difficult for us to complete the financial statements in time for the final completion of the annual report and adoption by the 31st of October. So we're continuing to monitor that situation and report back to Council on progress. I believe auditors are still having some of the same issues that they had last year. They have promised or mandated that they will improve, but we are still experiencing lack of experience in auditors to understand local government. And that a lot of them are very new and don't understand how we do things. So I haven't seen an improvement so far, but I'm hoping that by final, but there is a risk that we won't get a report adoption on time.
I've accepted an invitation to meet with Jacques. It came out of the blue.
Oh.
So I've got an invitation to talk to Jacques, which I will do. Karen, obviously, let you know what comes out of it.
Thank you. It'd be interesting.
They may be softening me up for the fee.
Well, can we talk about that bit now? So Audit New Zealand have issued their engagement letter and their fee proposal letter.
Oh, they have.
They've just issued it
Oh, okay.
yesterday. What would that? Monday,
Okay.
Monday,
Okay.
after me asking if it was going to come soon. So Audit New Zealand have requested a meeting with Paul, myself and the Mayor next week. And we will be going over their engagement letter and their fee proposal. So just to confirm, they're estimating their fees for the annual audit only, and this excludes the LTP, is going from 108,000 to 153. That's a 41% increase, and I believe other councils have had far worse increases. I'm not justifying it, but that is the measure of the market at the moment. And Audit New Zealand did tell me they would try and moderate our fees, so I'm assuming that ours could have been a lot higher. So we have budgeted well for that. The risk is that I don't know what the LTP audit fee will be. And we've asked for that, and we are waiting on a lot of information from Audit New Zealand to find out some of these things. So we budgeted for an increase of around 30%. It's whether or not the LTP audit. I don't think they know that yet, and they won't.
I'm told that the proposals for the LTP will come out at the end of the month.
Okay. We've already corresponded on the timeframe, and their timeframe doesn't fit with our timeframe for consultation on the LTP. So we've gone back to them and said we wish to.
Well, maybe I can't remember when I'm catching up with Jacques, but I'll let you know, Karen, because obviously I don't want to queer the pitch with what you folk are saying, although I don't know why I'd be queering the pitch.
No, I'm sure you're not.
There's some detail you folk have, which would be useful.
Yeah.
Look, in fairness, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything devious, but they are trying to include chairs of risk committees and discussions. So, which is good on them. I appreciate that. But I just, actually, normally I would have been with you folks. So whether I can't make, I don't know what it is. Anyway, I'll let you know. It's
Thank
something
you.
that we
Yeah.
didn't need to.
I think they're actually driving over the hill next week to meet us.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good. So they should.
Now, just a point, the next point is the fair value assessment of our infrastructure assets. Just to bit of background, is last year, and when I just joined, Audit New Zealand insisted that we do a fair value assessment of our infrastructure assets. And we revalue our assets every 3 years, but due to market conditions and the volatility of everything, they insisted that we do fair value assessment in between the years of revaluation. Last year, the revaluation came in on an average of 10% and between 9 and 10. We had assumed, but got clarity that what level of materiality did it meet Audit New Zealand, and we had to technically book those increases, hence partly the insurance increase due to the value of our assets increasing. The fair value assessment this year has also indicated that our assets are continuing to increase in value. So that is an audit requirement to be completed every year. So just to give you a heads up, we've done it early this year. I think last year we did it in October or November, and the year end had almost gone, and we had to hold up all the accounts until we could book the valuations. So we are waiting on a response from Audit New Zealand to see if it reaches the materiality level, because it was very complex, whatever that level is, and they didn't give us the detail.
So we indexed last year for the increase. We didn't do a full revaluation, did we? But we did
It's a fair value. Yes.
An index
Yeah.
adjustment. Okay, so which is not a full revaluation. And on top of that, we now have an increase of on average 7% over the prior in the last 12 months.
Yes.
Which isn't generally material.
That's what we thought last year when it was around 9, and
But
we thought it was 10.
10 is taken as the threshold.
And that's what we thought until they reviewed it, and they have other measures in their materiality level around PPE that they wouldn't disclose.
Can you tell me, they've got this now?
Yes, they had it over a few weeks
We
ago.
need to keep the pressure on them, because actually otherwise one of the messages that we will receive is we have to perform, which is true, we do. Equally, if we've got complete information to them, they have to perform as well.
And that is a
So
bit of an issue at the moment.
I'd expect that we should, if they've had this, you know, I mean, and I'm talking, they should turn this around within a week.
That is not happening with any audit requests.
Thank you. That's the sort of stuff I need to know.
As if you need them. We were the first council in the district to get this done early, by the way. We got in early after last year's.
Yeah, yeah, no, it makes sense.
So,
No, it's-
and we've booked them out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have trouble with it needing to do it. I just think it's appropriate that they come back to us. A, they're comfortable with us because it's audited evidence, and B, whether we have to or don't have to. So
Indeed.
they can, yeah.
A brief note on financial reporting. It's sort of explanatory here, but when your financial reporting or your operating revenues exceed 30 million, you change a public benefit entity guideline, or well, it's not even a guideline, it's a standard accounting standard. So you have to do your reporting at a different level. We don't have the internal expertise to understand what those implications are, and neither do probably a lot of councils. So we have asked PwC to assist us in determining what we need to do to our financial statements to represent them. And the fee that they have nominated is up to 10,000. It's not a big piece of work, but it is a compliance piece of work that we need advice on from like PwC.
Essentially, it's because we might for months be above the threshold.
Well, there's that too.
That was.
That's the other thing.
We've got a year's dispensation, but because of the probable delay in Three Waters reform for 4 months, we suddenly.
I know. No, that's just one of the components that
PwC addressing that by any chance?
we've raised it as an issue, but they were waiting for us to raise it with council that we needed to do that piece of work.
Okay, yeah,
And we're going back to them to now do
we do. Yeah, no, we do.
further research. The water service reform program, I will take it that you've read my content. There's a lot here, but it's also informing the committee, which we haven't done that previously. And this is the same for all regional councils. So we're not unique in what we're doing and the timeframes. As you will all know, that we are part of NTG, which is the Wellington region. And we, the Act or amendments to the Act is before Parliament at the moment. And also we know that NTG wishes to go live from the 1st of October 2024, which is partway into a new financial year, which creates issues financially for financial reporting for the LTP. And there are a lot of other issues it creates for us to work on.
So my understanding is the legislation, if it passes, the minister is the sole authority for determining when each entity starts, correct?
So basically, the first entity that's a big cap off the ranks is the Auckland entity. Forgive me, I can't remember which letter they chose.
Okay.
Well, that's what's right.
And mainly that's based on because of Watercare, because they're operating under that kind of model already. The next cap off the ranks that have expressed the interest is the Wellington regional one, which is our entity G.
My question being, is the minister is the person that sets the date it starts, correct?
In response to the member councils, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So why are we as member councils putting ourselves in a position that we are making it difficult for us by doing this in the middle of a financial year?
We haven't, but we are one of a number of member councils, and the majority of member councils within the Wellington region have expressed a desire to go with the October timeline.
So Martin's our rep on that, isn't he?
Yes.
Martin, have you got a comment on that?
Martin, you're on mute.
Right, hopefully I can be heard now. Yes, last week I got a letter from the Wellington Water Committee saying this is what they propose to do, and would I sign a letter? To the best of my knowledge, none of the Wairarapa Council signed the letter,
No, they didn't.
but presumably the majority did, and it was sent, I think, on, was it Friday or Monday? But it has been sent.
I can confirm that. So the Wairarapa councils didn't sign the letter. However, the minister responds to a majority request, and the majority, whilst the majority of them actually did express a wish to aim for the October timeline. I would say though that the preparations that we're doing, there's quite a lead in time in respect of all of the operational preparations we have to put in. So if we weren't involved at this early stage, being the size council we are, that would put an immense amount of pressure on us if we left it to much nearer the time. So whilst we, in part at least, some of this is we may feel that it's almost being forced upon us, the not being around the campfire in part of the conversation, it would actually propose quite a significant risk for us.
Okay.
Later on.
My next question is, do we have, I know you're actively involved in this, and we've been funded for this, have we got any extra bodies on sets doing the work?
Do you want me to answer?
Please,
Yeah.
yeah.
So as you know, I'm part of a regional CFO group with the NTU, which is the National Transition Unit. And to be fair, I'm piggybacking off that bigger group on a lot of the information and things that we have to do, and expressing some of our concerns around what we are expected to do as a small council and asking for more resources. Today, they confirmed that regionally, each of us are going to get the equivalent of 450,000 this year to assist with the transition, but they're only going to give us half of that at the moment over the next 6 months.
But are you able to actually recruit a body to do that? So I don't.
Yes, I know. Good question. Good question.
Taken away from our job.
Resources to backfill people like myself to get this work done, and my team.
So we've got a meeting next
We've got a
week
meeting
to talk
to
about
discuss.
how we go about doing exactly that. And in addition to that, we're working collaboratively across the 3 Wairarapa councils to make sure that our voice, our collective voice, is heard within the entity as well. So Robin Wells, who's our transition principal advisor, is actually in addition to doing her South Wairarapa role, because she's working part-time on that role, is also now working across the 3 councils.
You know, this is, I know the chair of the ICS was about to raise a letter about this very issue, hoping that all councils were going to sign it, saying that we don't have the, for want of a better term, bums on seats to do the work. Doesn't matter how much money they give us if we don't get people. Effectively, it takes you and your staff away from doing the work that your ratepayers are funding you to do. No matter who pays it, it's still, the work is not getting done that we need.
Quite.
And we need to be very, very clear to central government and say, you want this work done, fine, pay for it and get your people in here, because we can't afford to have you, the risk to us and a reputation. We've already got a bad reputation risk about delivery and so on and so forth. This is just going to make it worse if our staff are working for central government, because that's what you would be doing.
We've, as you know, we've already expressed the NTU, and I happen to know the NTU finance manager, CFO very well, that we simply don't have the resources to do this. And he offered to give me some resource. Whether or not that's paid for additionally, I don't know. I've yet to negotiate. But he recognises, or they recognise, we're a very small council and we have a limited capacity. However, I still think it's a risk that we won't be able to deliver some of the things that are needed.
Well, I suppose from I'm a councillor of South Wairarapa. I'm not an agent of central government. I don't give a toss what central government's policy is. Our responsibility is to provide services to our council, to our district, not to provide services for central government. And I am very, very reluctant to let our staff do any work the central government if we don't get bums on seats to cover the work that we are funded. We rate our members in our district to provide services that they are paying for. They are not here to pay for our staff to work for central government. That's as simple as that. Am I missing something here?
So I take it, critical thing is you are in the process of negotiating how this occurs. I think it's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, yes, indeed, yeah.
Do we have the money? Can we get?
Can we find?
But at what stage do we say, we've told you, work now stops?
So I'm also in discussions with the other two CEs of the YRFA who voiced that very concern. And we do need bums on seats, as you say, to actually do the work, not just a pot of cash. Because all of the councils are looking for the same kind of people to do the same kind of work. And that's, as I say, Karen and I are meeting next week to say, what's the feasible next step? Because if we can't turn this available fund into a person to devote to this piece of work, we are going to be in exactly that situation where we're going to have to say, can't do anything. And in fact, I have done it once already, back to the DIA, when they were looking for a transitional representative for the Wairarapa. And I've said to them, no work will continue until you've confirmed funding. And within a couple of weeks, they did come to the party, as it were. So it's not that the pushback isn't happening. It's just that we need to turn this now into a head count.
Do we need to give you more support by a letter from signed by the mayor saying our staff will not work on this?
No, we are managing the situation directly with the DIA and the NTU, and we have a good relationship. I'm using the other bigger councils in the district to help me get the work done that we all need to do. And in some cases, we're using Scott Consulting to do some of the work, and I'm just a little portion of that in the background, gleaning that information. So we've got it in hand, but it does create the risk is, can we backfill? Can we backfill my job?
And that's the only thing I'm interested in. Obviously,
I know you mean.
Yeah.
I know you mean.
Yeah.
Right intention. The other thing too is we spoke before the debt validation exercise, which we struggled to find the time. We haven't agreed that yet because we haven't had the resources to complete it. We're very close, and we pushed back to the DIA and said, you tell us what the number is. We think it's about here, and now we're trying to settle the final debt validation as at the 30th of June 2022. We're one of the few councils who hasn't done the work. So that's an indication back to them that we are limited in how much we can do and how complex we can do some of the work that's required. There's other work streams coming out, the digital stream, the pricing and economic stream, which we have to be over to be able to represent council correctly. So there's some work to do.
I'm very conscious that we're going into a very busy period. Well, it's always busy for finance.
Not to mention-
an even more busy period.
Not to mention the LTP
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
and the full rating review.
And all these things, and these are things that our ratepayers are paying for.
Yep.
They're not paying for us to transfer assets to central government. They're not paying for us to do work for central government.
So I think this has got to go another round, obviously, in terms
Yes,
of what you're saying. But also, I think the challenge here is, and I take thinking on board, and I think it's wise to express it. I think the problem is, particularly if this becomes an act of parliament, it's actually also a legal obligation.
Yep.
And that's the problem for us. I have been another of my responsibilities. Yes.
Here for you and I will differ. An act of parliament is only enforceable if you get the will of the people to do it. It's very easy to say.
Well, okay.
You say to the central government, sorry, we physically cannot do it. What are they going to do?
So let's hold your thought, because in that case, we need to let these folk do the next round. I think what I can hear is it's you're doing the right things in the sense of actually already deciding the level of capacity to them.
And it's been in writing and verbally.
And it's in writing.
Meeting.
So I think we see where that gets to.
Yep.
Maybe there has to be stronger words which come from a political angle, albeit it's useful.
There might be some 9,000 MBA people that might be available.
The biggest challenge, as we all know, is the uncertainty with the election. It could all stop at the end of October. So that's
Did you say that's a hope?
Sorry.
I think
No.
in many cases, otherwise we're talking about infrastructure asset risk. There's something.
I think, and in that, you're right, I think we need to.
And
move
it's
on.
so-
I think the risk, Alistair, actually here is that actually there will be a level of reform of some form. That's the problem. In fact, the national, if I can use it politically, the risks are that it actually creates more work because you're now going to look to a different configuration.
Correct.
So it's a difficult pitch to be betting on.
It is a difficult time and the
That,
end.
of course, comes right back to the first thing I said was, why are we doing it in the middle of the financial year at the worst possible time that we could actually do this? Why aren't we doing it at the end of a financial year, which would make your job significantly easier?
The arguments is
Because we're part of a group and the other members of the group have said, yes, let's go.
But what are we missing that they're seeing?
Well, I wonder, just as, and I throw this as a suggestion again, you'll say, well, Bruce, it takes time. Look, they're bigger, my Wellington City's got capacity to do, I suspect it is. Is there a chance to talk with a Wellington or a Upper Hutt or a?
Andrea, Reeves.
Yes.
I am on LinkedIn,
As to whether,
LinkedIn.
there's any,
but we still have to do our work for our council.
well, is there any capacity for them to help?
Yes,
That's what I'm saying. That's
Yep.
what I'm saying. I mean, they for them to manage the 1 October change is they'll do it. Do they have any capacity? And it's not just Wellington, but do any of them have capacity to help us in a collegial sense?
we will explore those options.
Good. Work out on Andrea. Now that I know, I'll ask Andrea whether she's given you a favourable answer.
Okay, just moving on. We all know that we're doing a full rating review and that project's underway. The next workshop, I think, is next week. So that's progressing with Philip Jones and that obviously is a key component to everything else we're working on with the LTP and blah, blah, blah. So no more to update on that other than that's progressing. And then the current timetable of the rating review. Just something worth mentioning that LINZ, which is the Land Information New Zealand, they do revaluation every 3 years. It's our turn. And this is just to inform councillors that this is their current timeframe for their work. I met with them yesterday to get some assurance that they are going to follow the proposed timeframes and that they will communicate with us better on their process and as they work through their timetable, that they communicate back to us and to council as to how they're making progress. So they've invited themselves to meet with you as part of the LTP project on their work and how that's progressed, how that's starting. They're going to come, I think, in November, and then they'll bring their findings to council in about February on what they've put together from a strategic perspective of the district. So it's a key piece of work that is linked very closely to the LTP. And we need those valuations to come in on time to be able to do the LTP. If there is any risk that that is not going to happen on time, then that could be a significant impact on the LTP. They know that. We are trying to manage it with them. And I believe other people in the community are also putting pressure on them that they have to deliver, and they have to deliver accurate information. They get audited as well. And so there is a risk around their audit plans and timeframes. So all we can do is keep bringing it back to council on what they are reporting to us on. So that is a big piece of the LTP.
Of course, no one in this committee was here last time we had this done, and it was one of the central tenets in the rates issue that occurred, and the uncertainty that the public knew, because it came out really, really late, and we didn't even actually appreciate the impact that it was going to have on how the pie was split. So, we can't go through that same thing again. So we're going to front foot this with the community and say, this is what's happening, and
So what I asked them for, yes,
Just to.
yeah, there is a huge risk, and I asked them yesterday for assistance with communications, and they're putting us in touch with their communications team on how they communicate this. And also we've got, I think Lower Hutt have given us their communication strategy. So I'm trying to mitigate that risk around the community engagement and trying to do it through with Lynn's assistance. But if that doesn't follow to plan, then, or there's inaccurate data, then that's a different issue. So trying to be proactive in promoting it to be delivered on time and things that the community needs to know. Just quickly, Lagoimas, I mentioned earlier to the Finance Committee, I think was 400% increase in the number of Lagoimas. There's a list of them provided. We are seeing recidivist people Lagoinaing council staff. Some of the requests are lengthy and detailed and time consuming. So that is becoming a daily part of our BAU, or a weekly part of our BAU. And in some cases, we are not providing some of the information because it's publicly available, or some of it is appropriate questions or information. So we are having to deal with a lot more Lagoimas than previously.
Three or four recidivists.
And we have people who have committed to
I presume I know the names of them.
pressure on
Who
council.
have actually committed to increasing the rate of Lagoimas as we had entered into the LTP. They've been quite vocal about it.
Well, given they've been very vocal about it, why don't we just start charging them from day one?
You have to be really careful in that space because it's not about the person, it's about the request.
The request.
So you have to assess based on the request, not based on the person who's.
Okay, then do we go back to the ombudsman and call them vexatious?
I have looked at the vexatious policy. Amy and I have done some initial scanning of what defines a vexatious. So a person can't be vexatious. So a single person, because they've given you 5 Lagoimas, cannot be considered vexatious. You have to make it based on the content of the request. It's complex. We've got some strategies we think we're working on.
A little bit of experience with vexatious people and working with the ombudsman, and that doesn't quite sound correct entirely.
We have a fairly new ombudsman
Yeah.
that has taken quite a different stance towards free and open information.
Yeah. In saying that, we did have somebody refer we responded to them and they said that wasn't appropriate. So they took it to the ombudsman, and the ombudsman has come back in support of us. And what did the ombudsman say? Mischievous.
Silly and mischievous request.
Mischievous request. So we're not backing down, but we've just got to be really mindful that there's rules and we're trying our best to adhere to them. And it's just workload.
Yeah, and the appropriateness of some of the Lagoimas are about what people have said outside of council. And so there was one sent to me recently and I said, well, I didn't say that and it wasn't said in council time or, in any of our meetings. So I can't answer that. But that's, people are picking up on everything, and social media is becoming quite aggressive
At times.
but when I'm choosing not to
you
answer.
guys know that.
So
Not on it anymore.
having a Lagoina about something someone said in public is I guess an easy out, but it doesn't help.
I think some of the things that we're getting asked about are why things have happened. And I'm very clear a why isn't an information request. And that I refer that back to the elected members that might have been involved in that decision. It's about information we hold. And if we don't hold the information, then it's a simple answer. If we have to gather, collate, compile, assess, analyse the information. That's when we start getting into how much time is this going to take us? Is it more than an hour? And that's when we go back to the person and we say, this is excessive. It's going to cost you this amount of money. Or you can go and look in the minutes on this meeting, this meeting, and this meeting, and probably assess it for yourself. So that's kind of our approach.
Thank you.
Just my final point in my report is to remind everyone of the current financial delegations policy, which is in the process of being reviewed, and that unbudgeted expenditure should come before council over certain amounts and certain limits, and that all unbudgeted expenditure must go through the chief executive and through council staff and not be committed by elected members. That's just a reminder.
Here a message. Is the Finance Audit and Risk Committee a correct reference now?
No, it's old. This is
Okay,
an older
so that's
document.
that presumably is the Finance Committee.
Well, the Finance Committee don't have any authority on financial delegations.
Is the Audit and Risk
No,
Committee delegations? No, okay. Well,
So
you
that will,
want-
this has all got to be reworked.
Okay,
And it will include Wellington in there.
yeah, okay,
That's an outdated policy, but one we rely on.
okay.
And we now have electronic purchase orders, so that helps us control some of the financial delegations.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Done.
Report. So we've got a massive resolution here. Do we need to pass all of those, or have they all been done by the Finance Committee?
Those have all been done.
That's a lot.
Should have been.
They were.
So can I therefore just suggest that we have a separate motion, which is simply that we receive Karen's finance report?
Yep.
I'll move that. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah.
Thank you, Alistair. Appreciate that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Thanks, Martin. Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Sorry to be a bit rude, but I sensed that probably, given I got to the tail end of the Finance Committee, was really being dealt with by them. So I think we just, there's no point us adopting those. We have a couple of actions out of that. Probably the biggest one is to think seriously for next year. Sorry, think seriously, wrong word. Just perhaps rework the way we look at our insurance strategy going forward. Otherwise, we hear the work that's going on, and you and I just make certain, Karen, we don't. No, wrong word. We need to be aligned when we talk to the auditor. Obviously,
Indeed, we do. Yes, thank you.
We're on the way. That's great. Linda.
Good afternoon, 4 o'clock, got 20 minutes.
Bev, you would-
Let's do it less than that. I'll take the report as read. Obviously, the big pieces of work for the policy and governance team are the long-term plan. This committee has the remit of looking at the significant risk register. We haven't reviewed it this month yet, so it's due for review this month. Karen's also spoken about the rating review and the intersection with that with the long-term plan. And recently at council, my team presented a number of policies for update/deletion, revoking, and we basically have now got to a 61% policies and bylaws are up to date from about less than 30 less than a year ago. So we're moving through them slowly but surely. So I just guess I can take questions.
Right, brilliant. Well, and I just perhaps try and help guide the discussion. That's really helpful. If I was just to go through it from what you've got here in terms of long-term plan, obviously we're starting to bury ourselves into that now. You folk have been buried for ages, I'm sure. Do you have a project plan around it?
Yes.
Okay. What are the significant risks?
So we've just worked on the significant risk register, a separate
Yes,
significant
and I appreciate that.
for LTP.
Yeah.
It's in a working draft. I sent it out to ELT yesterday,
Yep.
last night, for our review. Have we got them? So basically, we've been gathering them over a period of time, put them into a register. Amy's done an amazing amount of work to try and assess what the mitigations/controls will be. So it's with ELT at the moment. I'm happy to bring that to this committee. We've also got the Mayor and Councillor Gray as the project sponsors for the LTP, and they we've been having regular meetings and we've missed a couple. So that would probably go to them in the first instance.
Yeah. Look, I think it would be just, sorry, by the way, I'm not, no criticism. but I
No,
have-
that's right. This is the-
I just,
What did I say?
think
Interrogating questions?
one of there's a couple of key roles here the committee should play. One is, again, in a supportive sense, working with you. What are the residual high risks of the LTP project?
Yep.
So it's really just helping you, along with that governance group, make certain that our plan to plan is implementable.
Yeah.
Probably at some stage, you're going to have to think about the significant assumptions,
Yes.
the uncertainty,
Yep.
and judgments that we are bringing to the LTP. At
Yes.
some appropriate stage, that would be appropriate for this committee to deal with it, because they also flick over into the annual.
Yep.
Believe it or not. So somewhere down the track, we should probably have a look at those. But look, I think in the first instance, the critical thing is actually the comfort that we have that we should notice in the minutes that you've got a project plan, you've got the governance group, as you note there, you are developing your risk register. I don't want to put you in a difficult spot, but is there any particular risk at the moment that you would like to highlight for us?
So Karen and I have been talking about them. So the one around the revaluations, is one of them. Audit, have you got it? Yeah, audit, not meeting the audit
Yep.
timeline. So particularly the audit of the consultation document.
Yep.
So that would then not enable us to consult in a timely way, and that would then compress our timeframe there, the big ones, and then the uncertainty with reform.
So
the ones off the top of my head.
I noticed they're not in none of those three are actually in your risk register.
No, so that's
That's not a register that we're
So
talking
we've
about.
got
Sorry.
we've got a separate long-term plan risk register that we've just created.
Right. All I'm trying to reflect here, Alistair, is we're doing this once in a 3-year exercise, which is pivotal as we discussed in the workshop. One of the ways the committee can help us to understand what is the plan and what are the risks. So there will be a separate register. I take it the issue around the evaluations is, of course, that's driving up our depreciation expense.
And it's the timing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the timing of being able to do the financial,
Yes.
setting the rates, noting those.
Oh, sorry.
That's it.
Oh, the revaluation of the
The
capital value.
Bins, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the revaluation of the estimate of the revaluation of the assets.
No, we've done that. The
Okay.
value's done.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
we're
we've
just
got-
waiting for audit. So we've got resourcing, so workload for the work for,
Yeah. Sorry. Can I just clarify? When you do your long-term financial projections, you'll have to anticipate revalue.
Of course.
That's what I'm saying. Sorry. That's what when
Yeah.
I said revaluations, I was thinking about the depreciation impact that will have in driving up what we have to rate fund.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
so as a first run,
Yes.
where we've got resourcing.
Yep.
And being able to manage the workload,
And that ties back into
what Alice is
about
saying.
three waters.
The election and the uncertainty around the
Yeah.
election outcome.
Yeah.
Water reform and the uncertainty around water reform, audit. The uncertainty around the capacity of audit to happen in a timely way that enable us to then do our piece.
Yeah.
So that's Lynn's,
QV is Lynn's, yeah.
yeah. Fact that we have an interim CEO and we'll get a new CEO in the middle of our
Yeah.
long-term
due
plan
respect.
process. We put that in our risk register.
Good point.
The desire that's been articulated by elected members for as low as rates possible increase. So how we manage that.
Why is that a risk?
Because there's been some public comment that we will reduce the rates next year.
I understand that, but that is a business as usual, that we try and manage our rates increase as the lowest possible as a matter of principle anyway. So if that's businesses trying to have a low rates rise would be, to me, just business as usual. It's not an unusual thing that somebody says, I'd like to keep my rates rise. Now, whether that's achievable or not is a different story, but it is always in the back of your minds when you're doing your work.
So
It's a risk.
I'll articulate some of what we've written in here. It will have an impact on the design of services and service levels. So that would have an impact on community outcomes and the setting of community outcomes and the key drivers of the design of the LTP. And then that would in turn have an impact in community expectations of those.
I don't consider that a risk. I consider that business as usual.
I think
what we are elected to actually.
I hear your point out. No, sorry, more than hear your point, I take your point on board. We always look to be efficient. This is where I come back to the conversation we had in our seminar, which is actually, what's your financial strategy? Okay, now efficiency will be part of that, but I mean the critical point is: are you starting with from a position that it will be just simply the last, or are you saying it's going to be the current rates adjusted for anticipated CPI? What is it? Because you see, that actually is then starting to drive the parameters around which what you're really saying comes out as the risk is actually how do we bring levels of services within a financial strategy parameter.
Okay, we can reframe.
So I
it.
think that's actually presumably a critical decision, which while I take your point about the BAU, the question is I don't think you've defined yet what is your rating strategy.
No.
And that needs to be defined.
That's the risk.
Pardon?
So that's the risk.
That's the risk.
Yeah.
That's the risk. And I think that's it. Sorry. I thought the risk was actually broader. And you were saying that actually there may be, and let's face it, probably from governors debating in the public that actually, our strategy is the lowest rate possible, which may or may not be what we do. To be made.
Yep. Legal risk around not meeting the 30th of June.
Yep.
Deadline, and reputation risk around change management broadly.
Yep.
So levels of engagement and understanding with the community. Changes in central government that then make us look like we don't know what we're doing, or having to pivot rapidly and communications not being clear, internal, external conflict.
Within that last point as well, sorry for you, if we had decided on a certain level of service or type of service, we're going to have to spend time potentially reviewing our organisational structure, how we resource our work, and all of that would have to be in place in readiness for the start of the LTP period in order to deliver on those things as well.
And that's part of the intersection with resourcing as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's fun,
Yep.
but it's not,
Right.
we've pulled together what we've.
Can I just make a comment on risk and colour is really, really good. I like colour in the things because red is, I've got to focus on.
Yep.
Okay. When you tell me that there's a risk, here we are in August, and if you see it as a risk that we're not going to meet the deadline for June next year,
Yep.
I would suggest to you, as of today, the risk is low because you're putting your planning in place to get us to that stage. Now, if we don't meet some of those milestones, then the risk increases. But today, that's low because we all trust your planning to do it. And if you're going to have a risk register, it's got to be.
Oh yeah, we do.
It's got to be movable.
It's
It's not
dynamic.
fixed in stone.
Not a,
Yeah.
it's got to be.
But
private
that's
board.
really important. So, and then if I come to what you've presented to us here, first and foremost, I think we need to define what is extreme, what is high, what is.
So we do.
Well, I couldn't find those definitions in the thing. But then the other, and I'll come back to that, but the other thing I thought what I found really interesting, and I'm only going from colour to colour because it's, when I look at a register, look at it, okay, it's a high, what's it going to end up after we've done everything? And we're high, or we've gone from extreme to extreme. So I think to myself, everything you're putting into place is not effective because it's having no impact whatsoever on our risk. So what are you doing? What's the point? Because the idea of a risk register is to say, there's our risk, this is what we're doing, and this is the impact it'll have, and lower the risk. Because otherwise, what are we doing? Is that all right?
So
It's absolutely astute observation. It was exactly what I was going to make. But I think, I'm equally, Alistair, I'll be honest, I'm taking this on, we're developing now.
It is absolutely, it's just, so this is feedback on your person.
What I take rather than being a point of criticism.
No, it's not criticism at all. It's
something that
very much about how, if we don't get the first definition right, then at the end of it, you almost get blinkered into say extreme. And I've got to say that, extreme to me is like the risk is catastrophic. If we get this wrong, it's catastrophic. Okay. Just take the first one. If we don't quite get the Treaty of Waitangi thing right, okay, there's a little bit of reputational risk. There's some issues that we might not get some things done. But in the big picture of council business over everything we do, is that risk extreme? Because extreme to me says, alarm bells, everything, doesn't it? Is that what extreme?
Can I maybe suggest we pick another one? Because we do have obligations under TTT, and but maybe if we pick something like climate change, which is actually really difficult, because I can probably understand why under climate change is that it was difficult to actually see what impact any kind of mitigation would have, because there are some things which are actually outside of our control. So it's more around our preparedness and our how we're able to adapt to climate change in terms of our service delivery.
Okay, so well, here's a real practical one, I suppose, to try and the second last one, I think it is, regulatory failure and liability from continuing compliance activities. Okay, at the moment, we have a very good team who looks after that for us. So what is the risk to us today? That they make a mistake? Because we've got it as an extreme risk. To me, we've got a very functional team, very good team, well led. The risk is actually low. The implications of a mistake may well be high, but the risk of actually making a mistake is still low.
Well, isn't that why you have a column that says inherent likelihood? And it's measuring whether or not it is going to happen, as opposed to measuring the effect of it happening.
Well, we've got that as likely. To me, that says that our staff are no good.
I think.
Do you see what I'm saying, Amanda? It's sort of how we're reading this.
Yeah, Alistair, I think you're absolutely quite right. I mean, inherent risk is always a very difficult one to assess, because, in a sense, in the absence of controls, most things probably look like they're red, if not worse. And we tend to have a bias that actually that's the case. The critical thing really, I think, here is the residual risk, and is high where it's possible and the impact moderate. Is that the likely outcome? I think one of the things we have to do here, and I think we're setting ourselves up now, Alistair, for a program of work for the committee, is we need to meet with, is it Russell? Who's the owner of this risk?
Yes.
So we need to meet, pardon?
CE.
I suspect it's probably whoever is the GM that oversees it. Look, my point is we should be meeting with the owners of all of these risks over a period where we go through exactly this question. There's a sense to which I'm just receiving the report at the moment, because we also have to make certain, Alistair, that the left-hand column, that was part of what we should be doing today, is the left-hand column complete? Is it right? Are those actually the things that you should focus on? And perhaps in that sense, I'd like to, in that sense, take this more as information rather than necessarily.
I wasn't holding this as a gospel at all.
No. But having said that, we are still receiving a report that says climate change, crisis management, legislative compliance, and asset failure are still residually at a red. There has been obviously some review of these by ELT. Is there anything, Paul, that you could characterise about those risks and why we are concerned? So, Alistair, actually, before you answer that, Martin's got a question. So let me pose my question to you. I'd like an answer out of you before I go to Martin. Martin, you've got a point you'd like to make.
Well, thanks, Bruce. Well, I'd like to make two. One is that in my experience, these sorts of documents always end up with far too much stuff on them. People feel obliged often to fill out a risk because well, if they don't, somehow they feel they're not doing their job properly or something like that. And the end result of that is, and I've seen this many, many times, is that people start to look at the risk register as a sort of business as usual. We've seen it before, we'll go over it again, and then we'll move on till next month or whatever. Whereas if we were genuinely in the belief that some of these things actually posed a serious risk to the council, we would actually spend quite a lot of time on those items every time we meet. And I think it's fair to say that we're going to end this meeting without actually asking some of the key questions that I believe we need to ask about, have we got that risk under control? Are we reducing the potential seriousness of it, for example? Because it doesn't look much different to what I've seen on the other times I've looked at this document since I first became mayor. So my urging would be that we reduce it to those things that we are genuinely worried about, and that we actually take action on each of those things to seek reassurance that they will become less of a risk.
I think that's very helpful and very similar to my question to Paul. Given they're being monitored, what does really count at this point in that sort of in the informal way we're discussing this?
So the way in which we've approached this is from the point of view of our environmental context and trying to be representative of all of those things that impact on what we do and how we do it. Sorry?
That's just the assessment criteria that we use, definitions.
Okay. Oh no, that's on your
thing, yeah.
policy.
Also take on board the need to, it's meant to be a living document at the end of the day. So, you know, but there are things in here which at various points in time we have decided have been so significant for us that they've either felt we've had to call them out where they may not have been represented wholly in previous iterations, or they are emerging risks for a number of reasons. For example, legislative and regulative reforms. That's a moving beast constantly. Another one around critical asset failure, that a lot of the dependencies around that and the thinking around that was in terms of our annual plan decision making. So all the time, the plan is around this is that it's a representative list of themes that allow us to keep front and center the things that we feel are most important that we need to keep bringing back from time to time. Some things will come in and they'll be removed after a period of time as it's agreed that it's the risk has been reduced to such a point that it's no longer really something which we need to be actively managing in the same way. But currently, these are the things which we felt were broadly representative. I mean, an example that I'll call out again is around social license to operate. This is really quite important for us because of the, you know, it's around our reputation, our brand, how we're seen within the community. We've come out of the end of rate setting, and what does that actually say in terms of future consultation? So, and we're entering into LTP. So that was the thinking behind to this point in time.
Yeah, I get that. I think the and you know, and I think somewhere down the track we probably have to look at the colours.
Mm-hmm.
Because Martin's point, which I would take on board, and actually Alistair's point you made, I mean, even social license, if I say, well, it starts at yellow and it ends at yellow and we're doing something in the middle, it actually says that it's not an effective action because actually nothing's changed. Now, it could be we have to do it anyway, but we just have to, you know, the risk is going to always be high. I don't know. That's why I'm saying we need to have, I don't want to use the phrase, but I am deep dive into each of these with the risk going to
I understand.
So really what I was really trying to reflect here at the moment, or really my question was trying to reflect, given that's representative, given that we want to probably, you know, kick it a wee bit around and test it, And I agree, things will fall off over time. There's no two ways about it. I mean, like, take territory, do we need to keep monitoring? It becomes a question of risk appetite. And actually your point about direction of travel. So it's looking good at the moment, it's green. But actually, is it one of those sorts of relationships which is so critical we have to keep our eye on it? Is it one that actually?
Yeah, I mean, we all felt that was the case. Absolutely.
I'm just trying to put it up here. So really the point was there anything here particularly that was exercising your mind? I think we've probably got a fair bit of it already today, which is resourcing. We've talked through Water's been able to respond to that, etc. You've raised social
license to operate,
is definitely been critical. Yeah, Rebecca.
Can I, sorry, I'm not part of the.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I should have made you more than welcome at the start. Sorry about that, Rebecca. Yeah, most welcome.
I just wanted to, if it's okay to take a moment to speak specifically about the social license to operate section on the risk register. And I've prepared a little statement, if I can read that out. So I just wanted to make the statement that our mayor, as a representative of this council, has recently made statements to both the local and national media about issues that have not been discussed, let alone agreed upon by council. These recent statements include suggesting that the disposal of the libraries, pool and council vehicles is being considered, a predeterminative statement about rates rises, and an intimation about intentions regarding the reorganisation of the Wairarapa district councils. These statements have occurred within the last week, and in these statements, the mayor has not been clear that he is speaking individually and that his views are not the consensus of the council. I'm concerned about the reputational risk to the organisation as a whole and elected members individually if the mayor continues to engage with media without communications team oversight or fails to identify when he is speaking about his own individual views rather than on behalf of the council. Is it possible that this risk could be mitigated either by the organisation or individual elected representatives?
You're characterising from your perspective the nature of possibly an increasing risk around social licence.
Yes.
And you've chosen to focus on this as well, also, Paul, for reasons which.
Well, for a variety of reasons, not necessarily the one that Councillor Gray calls out, although that is something, which is, we're all conscious of. But the just the tension around the level of rates increases, the social media presence, and the tension on social media in general. The level of discourse that's happening with, in interactions with finance teams over rates payments and what that team's being subjected to. The council hears. Sorry, yeah?
Do you think this might be better that we go into committee on this particular topic?
Quite right.
Sir?
You're quite right. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, thank you. I'd forgotten that we were live streaming. Look, I think for the sake of meeting to, given we have got effectively a deep dive on this issue or a broader discussion, it would be useful. And I think it's in probably the public's interest that we talk about what is this issue in the way that you have talked about, Rebecca, by going into PX rather than actually staying in public. So while I can't quote chapter and verse, I'm conscious that I think it's right to do that. So I will move that we go into public excluded. Over second. Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the motion. So we're moving to excluded. Is the intention, Martin and Karen? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?